stood upon the sand of the sea and saw a beast. Rise up, rise up, rise up, rise up. Who is able to make war with him?
Dlaczego mogę siedzieć w ciepłym pomieszczeniu, na wygodnym fotelu, obżerać się tłustymi chipsami i enjoyować ten pokazuje i objaśnia piękny widok? Tak nie wygląda wielki ucisk. Tak w ogóle ucisk nie wygląda. Ok? Tak w ogóle ucisk nie wygląda. Tak w ogóle ucisk nie wygląda.
The Canadian government is preparing for World War III. And I don't mean bolstering the military. I don't mean boosting weapon stockpiles. No, I mean in the only way they know how, and that is to wargame and scheme as to how they're going to pacify their own population and quell the civil unrest that, of course, is going to accompany the run-up to that fateful radioactive day. Get a load of this. A secret RCMP report is warning the federal government that Canada may descend into civil unrest once citizens realize the hopelessness of their economic situation. They actually had a report commissioned, which has now, of course, been leaked as per an access to information request by a lawyer in the University of British Columbia. But they're projecting that the financial living arrangements for Canadians is going to deteriorate in the next 5 years. Now, this was written in early 2022, I believe, right around the time that that truckers' protest was going on, that they, of course, had to evoke the Emergency War Powers Act, which was later deemed to have been done unconstitutionally. And at the time when that was done, I thought to myself, is this a dry run for martial law? Because, of course, that was right at the beginning of the Russian-Ukrainian war, which, as we're going to talk about, is very pertinent to what's going on here. Now, they're saying that this unrest in these financial dire straits Canadians find themselves in is going to be amplified by polycrises, scenarios that coalesce in the future. We're talking about climate emergencies. We're talking about financial collapses, bubbles bursting, geopolitical turmoil, cyber attacks, terrorist attacks, the rise of populism, etc., etc. They're saying that all of these things are going to coalesce into a shitstorm, and it's going to lead to people taking to the streets with pitchforks on Parliament's lawn once again and protesting and trying to figure out why it is that we live in such a resource-rich country that is chock full of specialists. We have no shortage of skilled labor in the country. And in fact, we have a population that is growing thanks to immigration. Why is it that this bubble continues to burst? And why is it that there's this facade, this cornucopia, seeming cornucopia of food and products in our big box stores, in our grocery stores? Yet the price tag, when you look at it and you're a Canadian and you're working full-time, sometimes 2 jobs, you realize there's no way I'm going to be able to sustain this current standard of living and afford any of those things. What is happening right now today, in fact, in Ukraine is very important because today, one of the chiefs of staff of NATO, for the first time, Rob Bauer, the same guy who was warning about World War III and how we all need to prepare our bug-out bags a few months ago, well, he went to Ukraine today. And it was an interesting day because in the last 24 hours, Ukraine has sustained heavy bombardment. I believe, and don't quote me on this, but I believe it was either the heaviest bombardment to date or one of. 10 Russian bombers descended on Ukraine yesterday and blew the hell out of the place. Of course, the Ukrainians claim they shot everything down. That's what they always say. Anyways, what's going on there is very critical, because here's what's happening. A Russian representative today, a representative of the Russian government, in an interview today, said the following. He said, when French troops enter Ukraine, and the head of the Foreign Intelligence Ministry is projecting that France is going to send 2,000 troops very soon, if they're not there already, that when they arrive in Ukraine, that they will be terminated with extreme prejudice. Okay, that they're going to go out of their way to ensure that those troops in particular don't last that long. But what did they not say? They didn't say anything about a red line. They didn't say that NATO troops, if you enter into Ukraine, that we are going to attack the decision-making centers in NATO, in Brussels. They didn't say that. And that is very telling, because what this likely means is that the Russians are going to permit NATO to enter into this conflict, NATO ground forces. Now, if NATO ground forces are entering into the conflict, we must presume that there's going to be some level of air support, that there's going to be logistical lines from Poland, that there very likely is going to be a no-fly zone imposed in the western parts of Ukraine, hence the rapid militarization of Poland right now. So what this means is that now Russia, because they want to avoid a nuclear war, they don't want to have to use nuclear weapons, because they know right when they do, they're going to become even more of a pariah than they are now, and that is going to provide NATO the license it needs and the public approval it needs to get into a conventional, more than proxy war with the Russians. We're already at war with the Russians, but as I've said, neither side wants to admit it, because as soon as the Russians acknowledge that they're at war with NATO, then the onus is on them to attack decision-making centers in NATO countries. The longer they can postpone that, and what they hope to achieve is that when these French troops or German troops or Polish troops or whoever they put in, it's really not going to matter, it's going to be NATO troops. When these troops arise, the Russians are going to be banking on, okay, if we can immediately murk these troops, and then it's going to be official, it's going to be in the obituaries, they're not going to be able to suppress these deaths as they've been suppressing mercenary deaths for the longest time. If we can hold on and not use the nuclear option, and if the public in NATO sees these troops dying in large numbers, that of course is going to reduce support for the war. It's going to increase the climate of unrest that is already present in Europe as a result of the farmers' protests. And of course, you're probably going to get some synthesis of farmers' protests, which you're already kind of seeing, and an anti-NATO, anti-war protest movement. Those things are going to merge in some way. And when that happens, of course, the Russians will have won. But what NATO is hoping is that they can mission creep their way into Ukraine, impose this no-fly zone, and that this is going to provoke the Russians in order to doing something that is going to make them an even greater pariah than they already are. NATO is trying to provoke the Russians, and the Russians are going to allow it. That's the scariest part of all of this, is that the stakes are now much higher, because the Russians basically just said that it's no longer a red line for NATO to go into Ukraine, which is crazy. I never would have thought this was the case. But at this point in time, when you have Russia being attacked, having their nuclear power plants attacked, having their capitals attacked, and their oil refineries, and their military bases, their strategic triad attacked, their naval ports attacked, all aided and abetted by NATO, at this point in time, in terms of when the nuclear option is going to be utilized, I don't even know anymore, because the goalpost continues to get moved. I mean, we could see a situation where Russia calls NATO's bluff and they do a conventional strike on NATO forces either inside Poland, in the Baltic states, or they just go right to France or Brussels. This could be a scenario that unfolds and nobody responds utilizing nuclear weapons. Now, it's very unlikely that that's going to happen. And of course, what this does now is this increases the risk factor immensely, because now once you put 2,000 troops into Ukraine, once you put a platoon of NATO troops into Ukraine, it doesn't matter if you put a whole division, because once you do it officially, once you break the seal, which the French are about to do, we enter into a whole new realm of World War III. And this is why everybody, every single person, you need to be prepping like your life depended on it right now. Don't be fooled by the facade of this bubble in the market. Don't be fooled by, the shelves which are chock full of overpriced products and the overpriced real estate. Don't be fooled by the facades. You're on the right track. I know it's easy to be distracted right now. Understand that right now the central banks are hoarding gold like there is no tomorrow. This is why the price of gold is skyrocketing. At the same time, they're trying to encourage people to continue to go into these speculative investments like Bitcoin. Not openly encouraging it, but they make sure they put a ticker on popular websites like MarketWatch to make it seem official, because they don't want all that new money moving into what the old money is doing. And the old money is preparing for this thing to go sour real fast. Now, the Canadian government has a plan for how they're going to crack down when the fan. Most people think that World War III is the end, like when the bombs drop is the end. I wish it was going to be that easy, to be honest. I'll take a Mad Max post-apocalyptic Wild West hellscape over a dystopian authoritarian regime any day of the week, because then at least I have a fighting chance. The government has emergency war powers acts that they used in early 2022, and provincially they have their own versions of this. So provincial jurisdiction dictates that you can do certain things. You can claim eminent domain. You can expropriate people's property. You can conscript them to do various things, to either go and fight in a war or to provide their human resources and their skills towards other ends. And they have these plans drawn up for this reason. And this secret report that was leaked, of course, isn't even the half of it. This was heavily edited, censored. The redacted version that they gave us blacked out all the real crucial points in what they're preparing for, because they know that as we get close to that fateful day, there is going to be more and more unrest, because the global decoupling that is about to happen, the multipolar reality that awaits, is going to be one of extreme economic contraction. And we're not ready for it, okay? There's a race right now to get automation to try to compensate for the shortcomings of this new multipolar reality that we're in. But I don't think we're going to make it, okay? They're trying their fastest to get this AI automated world of robots doing all the work off the ground, but that's 10, 20 years out, unfortunately. Because right now we have a shortage of manpower, we have a shortage of military power, and so what they're going to have to do is go to conscription. They're going to have to do some sort of forced entry into the military. It's going to start off on the level of conscription, and then of course people are just going to be drafted. But first, they need the Russians to attack us. Now, what they say in this secret report, and this is from the National Post, which is a mostly reputable news agency as far as legacy media goes. It's one of the most popular ones here in Canada. Some might say it's right of center, some might say it's left of center, depending on your place of political origin. But they say the coming period of recession will accelerate the decline in living standards that the younger generations have already witnessed compared to earlier generations. For example, many Canadians under 35 are unlikely ever to be able to afford to buy a place to live. What is that old saying? You will own nothing and be happy. You know this fad right now of buying homes on Amazon? That's by design. Okay, I'm convinced that the whole tiny home movement, it's all by design. And you know what? Even if you try to do that, the Canadian government makes it impossible for you to put those homes anywhere. For example, there was an Okanagan couple that now faces fines and legal action because their tiny home doesn't meet building codes. And these are guys in the middle of nowhere. I mean, the Okanagan, a beautiful place, but, everywhere in Canada, aside Toronto, Vancouver, Montreal, Calgary, Edmonton, Winnipeg, is pretty much the middle of nowhere, let's face it. And these guys just wanted to go and live out in the woods, do their own thing. And even then, even in a tiny home, the government will not leave you alone. This is what's coming, guys. And Elon Musk and all his great inventions are going to be used against us. Unfortunately, Starlink is going to be used to track people off-grid. Teslas are going to be geofenced. And you are going to be... that's how they're going to enforce the districts. Is you're not going to be able to drive. You're going to make driving illegal. And this is not a slight against Elon Musk. People need to think about what's going to happen after Elon's gone with all this technology. SpaceX will be used for the weaponization of space. Neuralink will be used for the weaponization of your mind. What else is Elon into? Pretty much everything that he's a part of will unfortunately be turned against us at some point in time. Anyways, I digressed immensely. I apologize for that. I tend to do that a lot if you're new to this channel. The report labeled secret is intended as a piece of special operational information to be distributed only within the RCMP and among decision makers within the federal government. Right from the get-go, the report authors warned that whatever Canada's current situation, it will likely deteriorate further in the next 5 years. Did you hear about that on the news? All I hear about is bull market, everything's going to be okay. In addition to worsening living standards, the RCMP also warns of a future increasingly defined by unpredictable weather and seasonal catastrophes, such as wildfires. They always use this as cover for potential incidents. Yes, we do have to worry about worsening climatic conditions. I'm a proponent of that view. I'm not a proponent of the medication that they are prescribing to deal with it, i.e. you will own nothing and be happy, but that's another story. But this is all just a front for the geopolitical turmoil that is going to arise. Another major theme of the report is that Canadians are set to become increasingly disillusioned with their government, which authors mostly chalk up to misinformation, conspiracy theories, and paranoia. Everything is just fine. Now, of course, there are these things. They do exist. There's a lot of people that unfortunately muddy the waters and give us all a bad name. But there is a reason for people's discontent this day and age. There's no doubt about that. The past 7 years have seen a marked social and political polarization in the Western world. The censor's pen also deleted most of the section warning about paranoid populism, but they left the part about climate extremes in there. Go figure. Capitalizing on the rise of political polarization and conspiracy theories have been populists willing to tailor their messages. So this is all in line with their plans on censoring the media in the future and why they need to crack down on social media, right? Economic forecasts for the next 5 years are beyond bleak, reads the RCMP's assessment. Because really, if the market crashes, if the housing market crashes, then it's going to be if the bubble continues to inflate, there's going to be riots because nobody can afford anything. So the people who have anything right now, which is the middle class, if their property values decline precipitously, then they're going to riot. If the property values don't decline and they keep going up, then the poor people who can't even get their foot in the door yet are going to riot. Either way, they're going to put it all back on us. Okay, it's not going to be the elites. It's not going to be the top 1% who have to deal, not just top 1%, the top 0.1%. They're not going to be the ones that have to deal with this. You know, there's a great scene in the post-apocalyptic film Threads, one of the best, probably the best depiction of nuclear war ever made. The most gritty and raw and just downright depressing. And that's what it should be. In that movie, there's a scene where the government, in the aftermath, and this is what you got to worry about, the real fun starts after the bombs drop, okay? There's a scene when the government, after the bombs had dropped and, I don't know, I guess a few months into the radioactive hellscape, they're going from home to home, and whoever still has stuff, the government is basically taking it over. And they're moving families into people's homes who have stuff, okay? So they're putting the burden of the population that wasn't prepared and that didn't prepare, because the government up until that point was saying that preppers are all crazy, paranoid conspiracy theorists, right? And then they're going to put that burden back on all of us who have prepared. So again, this is the X factor we all have to contend with when hits the fan. Unfortunately, it's going to be the ill-prepared government. And I'm not talking about the first responders, the cops, or the people who work in the ambulance, the EMTs, the firefighters. I'm not talking about the military even. The incompetent government has caused this problem, the inflated bureaucracy, the people who really don't need to be there. I could tell you guys a story about an experience I just had today with one of these bureaucrats that just shows me how doomed we are, but I'm not going to, for the sake of being professional, and that's rare because I'm never professional. But even in relation to what's happening in the United States, if you guys think it's better here in Canada, take a look at this graph. This is the GDP per capita for the USA. Even after the pandemic, you know, it went down precipitously, then it's been going up. Here's what's doing in Canada right now. Before that, we were almost in line, but it's dropping, okay? Now, once we depose of Justin Trudeau, a lot of people think everything's going to get better, but I'm not convinced of that because of what NATO's getting ready to do in Ukraine, which is go into war with Russia. And you going to war with Russia because they have to, that's the fastest, easiest way to get to the Chinese. China depends on Russia. If we can destroy Russia, then we can destroy China. That's the name of the game right now, guys. And China is ramping up their preparations to move on Taiwan as well. What else do I have to say? I mean, go and watch the video I did about the government's secret nuclear war plan, because you need to understand the War Measures Acts. And if you don't think there's one for the United States, then you're delusional. There absolutely is a policy for how they're going to deal and how they're going to impose martial law. It's going to be different everywhere you go, but they're going to have a policy. And I'm not talking about they're going to come and steal your, 4-month food supply or whatever. We're talking about people who are resourceful. Those are the ones that really need to be concerned. If you own a lot of land, if you own real estate, if you are a person of above average means, they're going to come for that stuff, and they're going to do whatever they can to make our lives as miserable as possible in the run-up to this. Unfortunately, they never cared about us then, and they don't care about us now. So all I can say is keep on getting prepared. Watch our Blue Strip content where we share our experience of getting more prepared with you and our journey, which is only going to continue to expand and rapidly. Thanks for watching. Canadian Prepper out.